Kirana stood tall as she stepped off the transport, the cold winds of the planet biting through her armor. Her black, sleek exosuit glinted under the pale blue light of the twin moons above. Despite the cold, her mind was focused on the task at hand: diplomacy. Her people, the Kaldari, had been in a long-standing war with the human race. But now, their leaders were offering peace. Kirana had been chosen as the representative for the negotiations. It wasn't an honor she had asked for, but it was the role she had been given. The human outpost was small but well-organized, buzzing with activity. Soldiers and technicians moved about, preparing for the unknown. Kirana was used to war, used to being surrounded by weapons and armor, but there was something about this place that felt different. She couldn't quite place it, but it made her feel uneasy. Her reputation as a warrior had preceded her. Kirana had led many successful campaigns, each marked by victory and loss. But she had always kept her emotions locked away, buried beneath the surface. She had no room for them. Emotions were weaknesses, and she couldn't afford to show them. Kirana's armor was more than just a suit of protection. It was a symbol of her strength, a representation of her identity as a warrior. But it also held memories of her past, memories that she preferred to keep hidden. The armor was a constant reminder of the trauma she had endured, the losses she had suffered, and the violence that had shaped her. As she walked toward the command center of the outpost, she was met by a human technician. Adam was his name. He was shorter than most of the soldiers she had encountered in her travels, with dark hair and glasses that gave him a nervous look. He was far from the typical image of a warrior that Kirana was used to. But what caught her attention wasn't his appearance. It was the way he looked at her. He didn't show fear, and he didn't seem to be intimidated by her reputation. There was something in his eyes, a calmness that unsettled her.
"Commander Kirana," Adam greeted, his voice steady but respectful. "It's an honor to meet you in person."
"I've been assigned to assist you with your armor repairs while you're here." Kirana didn't respond at first.
She merely nodded, her eyes scanning the surroundings, noting the soldiers who stood at attention as she passed. She didn't need anyone to help her with her armor. She had always maintained it herself, but the humans insisted. They insisted on providing assistance in every way, whether it was needed or not. Adam seemed to notice her hesitation. "I'll be working on the power cells and adjusting the joints for more flexibility."
"I promise not to be in your way." The words were meant to reassure her, but Kirana didn't feel reassured.
The thought of anyone touching her armor was enough to make her skin crawl. It wasn't about the technology. It was about control. She was used to controlling everything around her. The idea of someone else touching her, even if it was just her armor, made her uneasy. "Just get it done," Kirana said curtly, turning her back to him as she made her way to a nearby seat. She didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to explain why she preferred solitude. It was easier to let people assume she was a cold, unfeeling warrior than to admit the truth that she hated touch. It was not just the act of touch itself, but what it represented. Vulnerability, weakness. Adam didn't seem to take offense. He simply set to work, his hands deftly adjusting the connections on her armor. Kirana could feel the tension in her shoulders, her muscles tensing involuntarily as he worked. She tried to focus on her surroundings, but every click of his tools sent a wave of unease through her. He was so close to her, so near her personal space. She felt the heat of his presence, and it made her anxious. The Kaldari had never been a species that valued personal space the way humans did. Physical closeness was reserved for the most intimate relationships, and Kirana had never allowed herself to experience that kind of closeness. It was too dangerous, too unpredictable. Her past had taught her that. She felt a sudden urge to leave, to step away from the situation before her emotions betrayed her. But she stayed still, breathing deeply to keep her composure. The repair was necessary. There was no way around it. Kirana's eyes flickered down to Adam's hands as they worked on the delicate wiring inside her armor. The precision in his movements was impressive, and for a moment, She found herself admiring the care with which he treated the equipment. It was clear that he was skilled, perhaps even more skilled than she had expected. Yet, as his hands brushed against the metal of her armor, she could feel the jolt of tension in her chest. She could almost hear the whispers of her past. Don't let anyone get too close. Adam's hands paused for a moment. Are you all right? He asked softly. The concern in his voice was genuine, and for a split second, Kiranan wanted to scream at him to stay away. But she didn't. She wasn't used to people asking about her well-being, much less showing concern. Just get it done, Kiranan repeated, her voice cold. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not now. Not when she had a mission to complete. Adam didn't push her further. Instead, he continued working, his movements steady and calm. Kiranan watched him for a moment, wondering why he wasn't reacting the way most humans did. Most would have been afraid, would have treated her with distance and caution. But Adam, he treated her as if she were just another person, as if her armor were nothing more than a piece of technology to be repaired. She didn't understand it. As the hours passed, Kirana found herself slowly growing accustomed to his presence. She didn't like it, but she couldn't deny the strange comfort it brought. It was as though, for the first time in years, someone was willing to show her kindness without asking for anything in return. And that made her uneasy. People who showed kindness always had expectations. There was always a price to pay. But Adam never seemed to ask for anything. He simply did his work, fixing her armor with the same care he would give to a valuable piece of technology. And though she tried to push the thought away, Kirana couldn't help but wonder, was there something more to this human than she had assumed? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the outpost, Kirana finally allowed herself to relax. Just a little. She still felt the tightness in her chest, the gnawing discomfort that came from being too close to someone. But for the first time, she didn't feel as though she was completely alone. The repair was almost complete. Adam looked up at her, a small smile on his face.
All done,
he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. Kirana stood, her movements stiff as she examined her armor. It was as good as new. The joints moved more smoothly, the power cells recharged. For a moment, she forgot about the unease in her chest. She felt a strange sense of relief. Thank you, she said quietly, surprising herself. She didn't like showing gratitude. It made her feel vulnerable. But she had to admit, Adam's work had been precise, even admirable. Adam smiled again, his expression warm. It was my pleasure. Just doing my job.
Kirana nodded, her mind already racing toward the next challenge. She had a mission to complete, and she couldn't afford to dwell on emotions.
But as she turned away, she found herself thinking about Adam and the way he had treated her, differently than anyone else. It was unsettling, but at the same time, it gave her hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this human than she had first believed. The following days at the human outpost felt like a blur to Kiranan. She remained focused on her mission, her thoughts constantly on the delicate peace negotiations that were to come. Her mind was sharp, her will unyielding. But there was something about this place, something about the humans, that continued to disturb her. The feeling had been growing since the day Adam had first repaired her armor. He was everywhere she went, always offering help or advice when she didn't need it. At least, that's what she told herself. Yet, no matter how hard she tried to ignore him, she found herself noticing him more and more. Every time she saw Adam, her unease seemed to lessen, if only slightly. He moved with quiet efficiency, never rushing, never intrusive. It wasn't like the humans Kiranan had met before, those who were quick to invade her space, quick to take advantage of her. Now Adam had a quiet patience about him. He didn't rush her, didn't push her boundaries. Instead, he respected her need for space, while still making his presence known in small, unobtrusive ways. Kirana didn't know how to feel about that. She had never been the type to rely on anyone, especially not humans. They were unpredictable, emotional creatures, driven by impulses she couldn't always understand. And yet, Adam was different. He seemed to see through the armor she wore, both literal and metaphorical. And he didn't judge her for it. He didn't push her to talk or to be something she wasn't. And that made her uncomfortable. She had spent years learning to control her emotions, learning to bury them beneath layers of armor and discipline. To let anyone in was a dangerous risk, a risk she could not afford to take. And yet, there was something about Adam, about the way he quietly went about his work, that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders alone. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Kiranan found herself standing in the observation deck of the outpost, staring out at the barren landscape. The wind swept across the rocky plains below, carrying with it a strange sense of loneliness. She was used to being alone. She'd grown up in a war-torn world where survival was everything. But here, on this strange human outpost, surrounded by strange humans, she felt a different kind of isolation, a deep, gnawing loneliness that she hadn't expected to feel. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. Without turning, she knew it was Adam. He didn't speak at first, but she could feel him standing there, just behind her, offering her the same quiet presence he always did. It was as if he was waiting for her to say something, to invite him into her world, but he never pushed. "Is there something you need?" Kirana asked, her voice cold and sharp, though she didn't mean for it to be. She hadn't meant to speak at all, but the silence had become unbearable. She needed something to break it.
"I just wanted to check in," Adam said, his voice calm and steady. "How are you holding up?" Kiranan didn't respond immediately.
She wasn't used to being asked such a question. Most people simply expected her to do her job, to perform her duties without complaint. She had learned long ago that showing weakness was a liability. But here, with Adam, something in his tone made her pause. It was genuine, without expectation, and for a moment she found herself considering the question. "I'm fine," she said, though the words felt hollow, even to her. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe it was because she didn't want to let him see her vulnerability. Or maybe it was because she had grown so accustomed to carrying her own burdens that she couldn't imagine sharing them with anyone, even if that person was offering help. Adam didn't push her for more. He simply stood beside her, looking out at the landscape with her. The silence between them was comfortable, not strained. And for the first time in days, Kira now found herself not needing to fill the space with words. She simply stood there, her eyes on the horizon, feeling the weight of everything she had endured, and yet finding a strange sense of peace in the presence of this human who asked nothing of her. As the evening wore on, Adam finally spoke again, his voice softer this time. "I've been thinking about what you said, about your armor. I want to help you with it, Kirana, but only if you're ready." Amore stiffened. She hadn't expected him to bring it up again. Her armor was her last line of defense, the final barrier between her and the world. The thought of someone else handling it, touching her, made her skin crawl. But Adam's words weren't forceful. There was no judgment in his tone, no demand. He was simply offering help. Kiranan closed her eyes for a moment, taking in a deep breath. She didn't need his help. She had always repaired her own armor. She didn't need anyone. But there was something about Adam's offer, his quiet patience, that made her hesitate. Maybe she didn't need his help. Maybe she just needed someone to be there, someone who didn't expect anything in return. "I'm fine," she repeated, her voice a little quieter this time.
Adam didn't respond right away. For a long moment, Kira thought he would press her, try to convince her again.
But he didn't. Instead, he simply nodded and turned to leave, his footsteps soft on the metal floor. "All right," he said, his voice just above a whisper. "But if you ever change your mind, I'll be here." Kirana watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller in the distance, and for the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the faintest flicker of something, a feeling she couldn't quite name. It was a mixture of gratitude and something else, something deeper, something that made her chest tighten and her heart beat a little faster. Over the next few days, Kiranan continued to work alongside Adam. Though she kept her distance, she didn't need him. She didn't need anyone. But there were moments when she would catch him looking at her, not with the usual wariness that others showed her, but with something different, something softer, and every time their eyes met, Kira felt that strange tug in her chest, the pull of something she didn't want to acknowledge. It was during one of those moments that she found herself alone with Adam in the workshop, where he had been working on her armor again. She stood at the doorway, watching him as he carefully adjusted the plating on her chest piece. His hands moved with ease, his focus entirely on the task at hand, but there was a gentleness in the way he touched the metal. Kirana couldn't help but notice it. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice a little sharper than she intended. Adam looked up, meeting her gaze. "Almost," he said with a small smile. "Just a few more adjustments." "Would you mind if I check the power cells? They could use a little recalibration." Kiranan felt a flicker of uncertainty. She didn't want him to touch her armor again. Didn't want him anywhere near it, but something inside her shifted, and she found herself nodding, though she didn't fully understand why.
"Go ahead," she said quietly.
As Adam worked, Karana remained still, her eyes on him but not really seeing him. She was aware of the quiet rhythm of his movements, the way his hands moved with precision, the way his touch was both gentle and purposeful. She had never allowed anyone to be this close to her, but for some reason, it didn't feel like a violation. It felt safe. And that was what scared her the most. That night, Kirana lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't sleep. Her mind kept drifting back to the workshop, to the quiet moments she had shared with Adam. There was something about him, something she couldn't ignore, but she wasn't ready to face it. She had never let anyone get close, and she wasn't about to start now. She couldn't afford to. But as her thoughts spiraled, she realized that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about needing help. Maybe it was about trust. Maybe it was about allowing herself to be vulnerable, just a little, with someone who wasn't asking for anything in return. The thought made her chest tighten. She didn't know if she was ready for that. But for the first time, she wondered if she might be. The days at the outpost grew more intense. Kirana found herself on edge, her thoughts consumed by the endless strain of diplomacy. Every conversation seemed to carry the weight of the universe. Each word carefully measured, each gesture scrutinized. The humans seemed eager to please, eager to show their commitment to peace, but Kirane could never shake the feeling that they were all just playing a game she had been forced to join. And all the while, there was Adam, quietly standing in the background, his presence constant, but never overbearing. She had grown accustomed to seeing him, but that didn't mean she liked it. He was always there, working on her armor, fixing something, adjusting the systems with that same careful attention that both fascinated and unsettled her. The strange thing was, the more he worked on her suit, the less she hated it. Each time he fixed something, each time his hands carefully adjusted the delicate machinery, something in her began to shift. It was as if, with every touch, the armor became less of a prison and more of a tool, something that didn't define her, something that could be trusted. But the thought of anyone touching her directly still made her uneasy. The idea of physical touch, of intimacy, was a foreign concept to her. It wasn't something that came naturally, not after the betrayal she had suffered, not after everything she had lost. Kirana had long since closed herself off from the world. She had learned that emotional distance was the only way to survive. And yet, there was something in Adam's quiet patience that made her question everything she had believed. One afternoon, the tension that had been building between them finally came to a head. Kirana had been in a meeting with human representatives, discussing military strategy and the terms of their alliance. She had spent hours listening to speeches, analyzing the humans' every word, trying to decipher their true intentions. By the time the meeting ended, she was exhausted, her mind spinning with the weight of it all. The diplomatic facade was beginning to wear on her. She needed space, needed to be alone to clear her head. As she left the meeting room, she found herself wandering toward the workshop. It was an instinctive movement, one she couldn't explain. She had no reason to be there, no reason to seek out Adam. And yet, her feet carried her in that direction, as if something was pulling her forward. When she arrived, she saw him hunched over a workbench, his back to her, as he focused on some component of her armor. The sight of him, so absorbed in his task, made her pause. There was a stillness to him that she found calming. She had never noticed it before. Not like this. The tension in her chest, the weight of the endless negotiations, seemed to melt away just by being near him. Adam didn't hear her approach at first. It wasn't until she stood just a few feet away from him that he turned, looking up in surprise. "Kirana," he said, standing up quickly.
I didn't hear you come in. Is everything okay?
Kirana hesitated, unsure of how to answer.
Was everything okay? The question seemed so simple, yet it carried so much weight. Was she really okay? Could she even remember what it felt like to be at peace, to not carry the burden of endless conflict and betrayal? "I'm fine," she said, her voice sounding more distant than she intended. She quickly added, "I just needed some time alone." Adam didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her for a long moment, his gaze steady but gentle. "I understand."
This place can be overwhelming, but you don't have to be alone, Kirana.
"If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." The words were simple, but they struck her harder than she expected. There was no judgment in his tone, no expectation. It was as if he simply wanted to offer her a safe space, a place where she could let down her guard without fear of rejection. It was the kind of offer she had never allowed herself to accept. It was the kind of kindness that terrified her. "I don't need anyone," Kirayan said, her voice cold. She had said it before, and she said it again now, hoping that the words would push him away, that they would make him understand. But Adam didn't flinch. He simply took a step toward her, his expression unchanging. "You don't have to do everything on your own," he said softly. "I know you're strong, but everyone needs help sometimes." Kirana's heart pounded in her chest as she met his gaze. She could feel the tension in her body, the instinct to push him away, to retreat into herself. But for the first time, she didn't want to. There was something in Adam's eyes, something that made her want to trust him, even though she knew she shouldn't. She had never been good at trusting anyone, especially humans. But in that moment she found herself standing still, her mind torn between the need to protect herself and the desire to let someone in. Adam didn't move closer. He simply stood there, his hands by his sides, waiting for her to decide what to do. He wasn't pushing her, wasn't demanding anything. He was simply offering her the space to make a choice. For a long moment, Kirana didn't say anything. She didn't move. She just stood there, caught in the pull of his presence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. I don't know how to trust anyone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words were a confession, a vulnerability she had never shared with anyone. Not after everything that's happened. Not after the betrayal. Adam's expression softened and he took a small step toward her. "You don't have to trust me right away," he said gently. "Trust takes time." "But I'm here, Kirana, whenever you're ready." His words were like a balm to her weary soul, though she didn't know how to respond. She wasn't ready to trust him, not fully. But there was something in his voice, something in the way he looked at her, that made her feel as though maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. For the first time in years, Kirena allowed herself to feel something other than anger or fear. She felt understood, and that terrified her. The next few days were a whirlwind. Kirena threw herself into her work, focusing on the tasks at hand. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the thought of Adam's words, the offer of trust, the kindness he had shown her. She tried to push it all aside, tried to ignore the nagging feeling that maybe she was more alone than she had realized. But the more she tried to block it out, the more it seemed to grow. One evening, after another long day of meetings and tense discussions, Kirena found herself wandering the hallways of the outpost once again. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know what she was searching for. All she knew was that the weight of everything was starting to crush her. The endless political games, the walls she had built around herself, it was all becoming too much. And then she found herself in front of the workshop again. Adam was inside, as she knew he would be. This time, when she stepped through the door, he didn't look up right away. He was working on her armor again, carefully adjusting one of the joints. The hum of the machinery filled the room, but Kirena barely noticed it. All her focus was on Adam, on the steady rhythm of his movements, on the quiet calm he exuded. He glanced up when he heard her approach, his expression unreadable.
"Kira," he said softly, "I thought you might be busy with the negotiations."
Kira shook her head, feeling suddenly exhausted.
"I needed a break," she said simply, her voice lacking its usual sharpness. Adam nodded, setting his tools down.
He didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he stepped aside, offering her the seat next to the workbench. For the first time, Kirene took a seat without hesitation. She didn't know why she was here, or what she was expecting, but there was a strange comfort in the quiet presence of Adam. The room felt smaller now, as though the walls were closing in, but in a way that didn't suffocate her. For once, it was a relief to just be still, to not have to carry the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. Adam picked up his tools again, resuming his work. Kirena watched him for a moment before speaking.
"You're right," she said quietly. "I don't have to do everything alone."
"But it's hard to let go."
Adam didn't respond, but she didn't expect him to. His silence was comforting, like a steady presence that didn't require explanation. She could feel the tension in her chest slowly beginning to ease. For the first time in a long time, Kirena allowed herself to simply be. And for the first time, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than the walls she had built around herself. Kirena couldn't remember the last time she had felt this calm. For the first time in days, her thoughts didn't feel like a tangled mess. Her emotions didn't feel like a burden. The hours she spent in the workshop with Adam, sitting quietly as he worked on her armor, had given her the space she needed to think, to breathe. As much as she hated to admit it, Adam's quiet patience had begun to change something in her. She was used to handling everything on her own, but somehow, with him, it didn't feel so heavy. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, and neither was the occasional brush of his hand against the armor as he made his adjustments. There was something different about it. She had never let anyone in before, never allowed herself to feel vulnerable. But with Adam, there was no pressure, no demand for anything. It was just him, being there. The walls she had so carefully built around herself seemed to be cracking, and it terrified her. She had spent years building those walls, protecting herself from pain and loss, from betrayal and heartbreak. But as she sat next to him now, watching him work, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't need those walls anymore. She wasn't sure how long they had been sitting there, the quiet between them as comfortable as ever. The only sound was the soft hum of the tools Adam used to repair her armor, the occasional clink of metal on metal. Kirena found herself lost in the rhythm of it, her thoughts drifting away from the endless stress of diplomacy, from the tension she felt each time she faced another human representative. In this small space, with Adam, she felt something else, something that wasn't fear or anger, something that was soft, something that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Adam looked up from his work, meeting her gaze. For a moment, neither of them said anything. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just quiet, but there was a question in his eyes, one that Kirana had been avoiding. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly, his voice gentle, as though he was afraid to break the fragile peace that had settled between them. Kirana hesitated, her chest tightening at the question. She hadn't let herself think about it. She hadn't allowed herself to think about how the weight of everything was slowly starting to break her down. The constant pressure of negotiations, the fear of failure, the responsibility of representing her people, it was all too much. But Adam's simple question made her realize how much she had been carrying, how much she had been hiding from herself. "I'm tired," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like they carried the weight of the universe with them. "Tired of pretending that I can handle everything on my own." Adam didn't respond immediately, but Kiranan could see the understanding in his eyes. He didn't judge her, didn't try to offer solutions or tell her that everything would be fine. Instead, he simply nodded, his gaze softening. "You don't have to pretend, Kirana," he said quietly. "It's okay to let someone in." "You don't have to carry everything alone." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so long pushing people away, telling herself that she didn't need anyone, that she couldn't trust anyone. And yet here he was, offering her something she had never thought she could have. Trust. Connection. It was a simple offer, but it felt like the most profound thing anyone had ever given her. Kirana looked away, her eyes settling on the floor as she fought to hold back the emotions that threatened to rise within her. She had always believed that opening herself up to someone would make her weak, vulnerable. But now, sitting next to Adam, she wasn't so sure. For the first time, she felt as though maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to be seen, to be human, for lack of a better word, to not have to hide behind the walls she had built. "You're right," she said, her voice quieter now, but there was a certain heaviness to it. "I've spent so much time hiding, from myself, from everyone else. I didn't want to let anyone in. Didn't want anyone to see me for who I really am." Adam's expression didn't change, but the way he looked at her, the way he listened, made her feel like maybe she wasn't as alone as she had always thought. She wasn't sure why she was telling him all of this, why she was allowing herself to be vulnerable. But for some reason, it didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel like a mistake. It just felt... "Right, you don't have to hide anymore," Adam said, his voice so gentle it almost seemed to wrap around her like a soft blanket. "I'm not going anywhere." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. She didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't sure if she was ready to trust him fully, to let go of everything she had kept inside for so long. But in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could. Maybe she didn't have to do everything alone. Maybe she didn't have to carry the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders by herself. Kirana looked at Adam again, her gaze meeting his. There was no fear in his eyes, no judgment, just patience. And for the first time in her life, she felt as though maybe she could trust someone. Not just with her armor, but with her heart. With her pain. With the person she had spent so many years hiding from the world. "I don't know how to let go," Kirana admitted quietly. "I don't know how to trust, how to be vulnerable. But I want to try." Adam didn't say anything at first, but his expression softened. Slowly, he reached out, his hand hovering just a few inches from her arm. Kirana froze for a moment, her heart racing at the thought of him touching her. She had always hated the idea of anyone touching her, even in the most innocent way. But now, as his hand remained still, waiting for her to make the choice, something in her shifted. It wasn't fear that she felt, not entirely. It was hope. It was the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could trust again. Slowly, cautiously, she nodded. Her heart pounded in her chest as Adam's hand gently rested on her arm. a touch so light it was barely noticeable. But to Kira, it was everything. It was the beginning of something new, something terrifying and wonderful, all at once. "I'm here," Adam said softly, his hand steady on her arm.
You don't have to be afraid anymore.
For the first time, Kirana let herself believe those words. She wasn't afraid anymore. She didn't need to be. In the days that followed, things began to change. The walls Kirana had spent years building around herself started to crumble, little by little. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something that happened overnight. But with Adam's quiet patience, with his unwavering support, Kirana began to open up in ways she had never thought possible. The peace negotiations continued, and while Kirana still felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, it didn't feel as heavy as it had before. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Adam by her side, and that made all the difference. One evening, as the sun set over the outpost, Kiranan stood by the observation deck, watching the last rays of light disappear behind the horizon. Adam stood next to her, quietly observing the same view.
"You know," Kirana said softly, "I never thought I would be able to trust anyone again, but you've shown me that it's possible."
Adam didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. For the first time, Kirana felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was living. And for the first time, she didn't feel alone. "I'm glad you're here," she said quietly. Adam turned to her, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "I'm glad I'm here too." And for the first time in a long time, Kirana allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something more than just survival. She believed in trust. She believed in connection. She believed in the future. And for the first time, she didn't fear what that future might hold.